Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to Chattering with Nicholas Vince. Sorry, running just slightly behind schedule. So first of all, a thank you to everybody who's subscribed. There are now over 700 subscribers to this channel, which is amazing. Thank you very much indeed for that, and also to everybody who's purchased from the shop. It's done very well in its first 24 hours, so thank you very much indeed, folks, for that. I shall be shipping some stuff out to you, all your goodies. We'll be going out tomorrow, the first lot of shipping. So without further ado, so what I said is that obviously this is about your favorite werewolf movie. If you'd like to come and join me and chat live and discuss your favorite werewolf movie, you're going to need something like the setup that I've got, which is basically a phone, laptop, a laptop with a microphone and a camera, or a phone, or an iPad. The easiest thing for me to do is to invite you into the Hangout, and the easiest way for us to know that you want to do that is to comment on the YouTube video that you're watching at the moment. And to the right hand side you should be able to see the comments, and you should be able to type in a comment there. So if you'd like to join me, please put in your name. Craig, you should be able to see your name on the screen, but also the film that you would like to discuss and chat about. That would be wonderful. So to set this up, I decided to put up a survey of the most popular horror movies, werewolf movies. Just a few. Thank you to everybody who voted. That was really interesting. I had some very interesting suggestions. I particularly like the suggestion of Michael Jackson in Thriller as a werewolf. Yeah, he's a really he's a really cool werewolf. It's a really beautiful makeup, that particular werewolf. So very good suggestion. And my mate Lawrence Harvey, who I hope you're feeling a lot better, Lawrence, was suggesting The Curse of the Werewolf with Oliver Reed, the actor. This is the Hammer werewolf movie, and he suggested that one. I haven't had a chance to watch it. I remember seeing it late at night on a Friday, probably, when the BBC used to screen the horror movies, which is how I first got into watching horror movies, was late at night on Fridays. Around about 10 o'clock, they put on horror movies. This is in the days in which we had 1-2 channels back in the 1960s or early 70s. Actually, we had 3 back then because we had BBC 2. But yeah, so it's an interesting film. I was reading some reviews about it saying it's a slow burn. It makes the top 10 list of some people's top 10 horror movies, top 10 werewolf movies, rather. So it's, but I just think it's such an amazing casting. Oliver Reed is just part wolf anyway. It's a little like Jack Nicholson. Just such an obvious casting because they're so animalistic. So that's really, to me, it's really interesting that you cast somebody like that. And then you've got the other sort of castings where you've got people who are very mannered. So what I thought we'd do to begin with, is to say, if you would like to join me, otherwise I'm just going to be chatting for about half an hour or so, and talking about my favorite werewolf movies and why I like them. But before we do that, what I'm going to do is hopefully find a list that I had a few moments ago. Yes, there we are. So hopefully you can still see me. And I was wondering what the earliest werewolf movie is. And according to the trusty Google, and I have no reason to doubt it, though somebody might be able to and could prove it otherwise. The first werewolf movie is called The Werewolf. It was first screened in 1913. It's a short film, and it's lost. Funnily enough, it was Universal who distributed it or created it. The reason it's lost is they believe all the copies of it were destroyed during a fire at Universal Studios in 1924. So the first one we can't watch. So that's The Werewolf, and then it seems to have kind of complex plot. Basically, reading it from Wikipedia. And or The Werewolf, an old Indian legend. Yeah, actually, I think the Werewolf, the Wikipedia one, is better. Key on E, a Navajo woman becomes a witch after erroneously coming to believe that her husband has abandoned her. She teaches the same skills to her daughter Watuma, who transforms into a wolf in order to carry out vengeance against the invading white settlers. Then, 100 years after Watuma's death, she returns from the dead to kill again. So, yeah, brilliant. That sounds like a really good fun piece. It's only a short film. That we reckon is probably the first one. The next one you can watch, I found it on YouTube. I haven't had a chance to watch it, is Wolf Blood. That's 1925, and that one's set in a Canadian, again, a silent movie, and is set in a logging encampment in Canada, and it's a man who gets injured on the on the logging site, and because nobody is available to give him blood, the doctor transfuses wolf blood into his system, and he starts dreaming that he's running with ghostly wolves, and the other guys in the logging encampment believe that he must be a werewolf. I haven't had a chance to watch that, but I really want to. It sounds really interesting. Particularly, I'd love to know how they do the running with ghostly wolves. The next one that's come up is the Werewolf of London, 1935, and this is Universal Studios. So this is their first outing of the Werewolf of London. Now, what I find really interesting about this is that it has a line in a book, which I'm going to reach. Excuse me, whilst I reach from my book. I didn't mean to put it back again. This is the book. Some of you see me refer to it. This is how I really got into horror movies, and you can tell because it's got sticky back plastic all over it to try and keep it pristine. And one of the quotes in the front, and I'm afraid this is Dennis Gifford who had got this wrong. Dr. Yogami, played by Warner Oland, in 1935. No, got that right, absolutely. And the quotation is that the werewolf instinctively seeks to kill the thing it loves best, which I think is one of the interesting things about werewolves, is that, having looked at a few movies, and I'll talk about the three I watched this afternoon, and some of the others I've already watched and didn't need to watch again. I think there's two ways of doing it. It's either which is a lot to do with, for example, The Howling, which I had not watched before, and watched for the first time this afternoon. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's lovely to see Dee Wallace in it, and it's the werewolf as the monster. It's that thing out there. It's the spirit in the woods. It's the evil in the woods, and you don't really get, and it's the monster, it is the thing, it's the bad guy. You don't really get to understand much of what it is to be a werewolf. The other thing, of course, about it's that representation of sexuality and the wildness of people. I mean, it's graphic. It's not, and again, I should apologize, spoilers, anybody who's watching this, but it starts with Dee Wallace going into a very dodgy porn store it's made in 1981. This is the days where pawn shops had little booths where you could go and watch clips of things, and it basically starts with Dee being in one of these booths watching a porno, which is obviously a rape. And then it kind of expands. So there's a lot to do about sexuality, The Howling. And for me, it has one of the nicest endings, I have to say. I'm not going to give it away, and careful if you YouTube it, because somebody has put, this is the end of The Howling, and I'm thinking, yeah, don't give the game away to everybody. And I think it's one of the most powerful endings, in that you do have some sympathy for the victim of being a lycanthrope. And for me, that's what is one of those more powerful aspects. But most of the movie is simply about the werewolf being a monster, and your sympathies are all with the victims of the werewolf rather than what it is to be a werewolf itself. And I think this is one of the real things about the earlier movies, and one of the things I really love, and particularly The Wolfman, 1941, Lon Chaney. Talbot is a victim. He doesn't want to be a werewolf. He doesn't want to believe he's a werewolf. He's warned, and he's having to come to terms with it. And there's that whole angst of being out of control. Interesting, made in 1941, during the war, the Second World War. The people, the ordinary man who becomes a monster, which, if thinking about the Second World War and what went on, about how ordinary people behaved atrociously, murderously. I think it's kind of interesting that was made at that time. But a beautiful film, wonderfully written, and great performances and great transformation. It's interesting. I think the other thing about werewolves and werewolf movies is that we really have to acknowledge the genius of some of the makeup effect, the makeup artists who do these transformations. I remember reading that possibly in Mr. Gifford's book, the fact that in one of the early transformations, I'm not quite sure, possibly Lon Chaney, possibly, that basically to get the transformation of the hand was obviously done by putting the hand and then just filming it and then sticking pieces of hair to it. Now, in order to keep the hand absolutely still between takes for the different part of the transformations, then the little pieces of the hand was basically nailed to a piece of wood with small pins to actually keep the hand in place. Now, that's horrible, thinking having to stand there for hours with you literally unable to move whilst they do that. Obviously they didn't think to actually just kind of make a wax hand and do it like that. Yeah. I mean, the other classic way of doing a werewolf transformation is they dive behind the sofa and then you see the clawed hand coming over the top, which is what we did when we did the mock trailers for Peter Vincent in Dead Mouse's You're So Cool, Brewster documentary. That was great fun. Right. Silver bullet. Okay, we've got some comments that come in. If I'm feeling nostalgic, The Wolfman. If I'm feeling geeky, Silver Bullet. If I'm feeling angsty and scrappy, Underworld. And if I'm feeling silly, Mystery Science Theatre's 3000 riff of Werewolf. Oh, I'll have to thank you. That's Tipra Babe. Thank you very much. I shall check out some of those. I'm kind of, having watched a few werewolf movies now, it's really interesting to take this one monster and to see the different things that are that have been come out of it. So yeah, 1935, The Werewolf of London, and doing my research for this, something I'd never heard of before, but it'd be kind of interesting. Again, I want to have a look at is 1946's She-Wolf of London, which is, again, from what I've seen of the trailer, is about that thing, but it's a woman this time who's a werewolf. It's not often that you see women. One of the obvious exceptions to that is a film that I caught up with for the first time this afternoon, and that's Ginger Snaps, which stars Catherine Isabel. Again, this is really interesting. I really enjoyed this film. What I particularly liked, again, it's the thing about sexuality. In this instance, it's about teenage girls and sexuality, and how the geek, two girls who are obsessed with death, sisters in this case, become werewolves. And again, what I find very interesting about that was the masterful way that you don't get to see much of the monsters. It's a really old adage, anybody who knows and makes and watched horror movies, is that the dark is probably scarier than actually the monster itself. It's the thing in the. This is one of the reasons why I think werewolves are so popular as a monster. It's a primal fear. If you think about our ancestors, a lot of them lived near forests because, before we chopped them all down to make space and plowed up the land. These are dark spaces. You don't have to go in more than 100 yards into a thick forest without you're actually in the gloom. If it's thickly overcast, if you've got a thick canopy over the top, it really can be very dark. And they're obviously at night, you have no light coming through. And I think that's really interesting about Ginger Snaps, is you don't get to see much of the monster to begin with, and it's very fast, it's very rapid. These are really classic ways of instilling angst and danger. Things happen really, during an attack by a wild animal, you really don't get to see details, I imagine, not being attacked by a wild animal myself. You don't get to see details. It all happens very quickly. It's very savage. And I particularly like the fact that attack on Catherine Isabel's character in the early part of the movie, that really is quite fascinating as far as I'm concerned. And again, great. And it is a slow transformation. Again, sorry, spoilers for this movie if you've not seen it. But rather than, you're bitten once, you wait for the full moon, and you turn at the full moon, and then you turn back again. This is a long, gradual change. This is a physicality. So again, it's about teenage angst. It's about, your body not doing what you sprouting hair, literally sprouting hair. It's wonderful. But it's, growing that you didn't expect to grow. A fascinating thing. So really enjoyed Ginger Snaps for that reason. It's well worth it. And I'll tell you what happens in the end. But again, great makeup. But I do like the slow transformation, and the transformation of in the great performance by Catherine Isabel, who starts off as this gothy, geeky, really shy, and who develops into this very powerful, sexy, alluring young woman as a result of being bitten. So yes, it's an allegory for an allegory for puberty. Absolutely. Michael, thank you. The Awful, an American Werewolf in Paris. Hilarious bad CGI werewolf. I've heard of American Werewolf in Paris. I've never seen it. Mostly because of the reviews when it came out, and also having seen American Werewolf in London. So yeah, but I will check it out for the hilariously bad CGI werewolf. That's fine. I think one of the things that this is, and hands down, having watched a lot of, it's interesting. A lot of werewolf transformations are very similar naturally. One of the interesting things, one of the ones that I really did, and I realized must have affected me most, is Neil Jordan. Neil Jordan's The Company of Wolves, which I think must have been the first modern, after Universal, 1941, is probably the first modern werewolf movie that I saw. I remember seeing it at the cinema and being blown away by it. And when I was writing my short story, Family Tree, that is what I had used. And funnily enough, is watching again this afternoon, and I didn't realize how much it had influenced me in thinking about my design of the werewolf. It's the classic thing of the werewolf emerging from the skin as if it's shedding a carapace. And again, we're talking about allegories for puberty. Company of Wolves is very definitely, that's what it is. Totally 100% all about the change from childhood into womanhood. It's allegory. It's brilliant. You have so many, there's the thing that it starts with the dream, the young girl dreaming in the bedroom of her elder sister who's banging on the door and wants her to get out of bed, being chased through the nursery, through nursery figures, teddy bears, sinister teddy bear, life-size teddy bears, and a soldier doll. Really, really interesting. And I think one of the things I love, again, what do I love most about The Company of Wolves? The dialogue. Some of it's written in rhyming couplets. It's the fact that it is fairy stories. To be more precise, it's folk tales. It's based, Angela Carter, who wrote the short story on which it's based, is also wrote the screenplay with Neil Jordan, the director. And I love that you get all these different stories. And again, you've got, these wonderful, you've got, as I say, some great transformations. You've got some silly transformation, but one of the things I like is, again, just independent filmmakers. There is a scene at a wedding. It's all kind of set in this mythical age that's kind of medieval, kind of 16th century Georgian, but there's a Rolls Royce in it at one stage, beautiful Rolls Royce, lovely car, and with Terence Stamp sitting in the back playing the devil. And it's just the power of the stories, and it takes itself not too seriously, but with complete conviction. Angela Lansbury is in it, playing the grandmother, and she knits her granddaughter a red cape. So you get Red Riding Hood, you get everything in it, and it's probably one of the best. It's not often that you get rhyme poetry put on the posters for a film, but you did on The Company of Wolves. I'll try and remember the complete quote and probably give it to you at the end. So Company of Wolves, I really, really recommend, as I do Ginger Snaps. And the third one I watched this afternoon was The Howling. What I wanted to watch and didn't have a chance to do, and it's only 17 minutes long, and that is the 1941 Werewolf. The Wolfman. I'd also want to watch the remake of 2010. Not as popular as the first one, and I know very few people actually like that. I remember it as being not too bad. I remember seeing it. We must have seen it when it came out on DVD or Blu-ray or something, or rented it online or something, because I really like to see it because it's got such a good Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins in it. They're always good value, and my memory is that the werewolf is magnificent. These things are unreasoning beasts. I think that's the thing about werewolves, that they are going to be unreasoning beasts. So The other movie I really would like to see it again, and I haven't had a chance to see it, and that's Dog Soldiers, which is very popular in terms of the voting. When I ask people to talk about their favorite movies, is Dog Soldiers, a nice British one, nice British film, and if not Paul Hyatt, I believe, who's been a previous guest on the show, did the makeup for that one, and again, great werewolves. It's interesting, you've got again talking about the makeups, the snout, the long snout coming through that always worried me, because I think, well, where the hell does it come from, this snout that magically grows, which I kind of link the Howling for in terms of the transformation, because you get the idea of the flesh becoming completely and utterly malleable, that the werewolf is bubbling up underneath the skin. And in one scene where a limb gets chopped off, it's swollen and bloated, and then it reverts back to being a human hand. I kind of like, because there is this whole idea of the plane of liquefaction. But of course, the one I have to say, the one transformation that I think is probably the one that everyone goes to, with the classic line of "It burns," and that's American Werewolf in London, which of course was made at the same time as The Howling. In fact, there was a whole thing about, if you want to know more about that, get Paul Davis's book on the making of American Werewolf in London, or watch his documentary, or watch my interview with Paul, which is on the YouTube channel. That probably is, I think, the best, because as I mentioned everywhere else, it's about doing the darkness. Your monster becomes really scary because it is in the shadows, and you don't see much of it except the result of the attack and of the viciousness of the attack. But that transformation sequence in American Werewolf in London is just extraordinary. I mean, I think it goes on for nearly that. It feels about 5 minutes. I think it's probably only about 4 or so. But it burns, and you feel every bone crack and break. Talk about growing pains, going back to adolescence again. But and I think one of the real reasons it's so powerful is because you follow the story of the werewolf and the effect that it has on him, and the whole thing, disbelief, and he's falling in love for the first, he's falling in love, and everything's going well, and he realizes his best friend's dead, who then comes back to haunt him, and he gets to meet all the victims of the werewolf attacks and so on, and how do you deal with that situation, and what do what can you do if that's what you're doing? There's a Anton Yelchin did a very interesting episode of Criminal Minds, where he plays a young man who's a psychopath, who believes he's a psychopath and doesn't want to be, and he's trying to deal with that fact. And again, it's that similar dilemma. What do you do if there is part of your nature which you cannot control that makes you into a murderer? So that this is one of the things about werewolves. I think it's one of the reasons why they're possibly so popular. So I think what have I got? We got the Wolfman, Curse of the Werewolf, Company of Wolves, The Howling, Ginger Snaps, The Wolfman, 1941, Dog Soldiers, and American Werewolf in London. So those are all the werewolf movies that I've seen and watched and prepared and talked about. So, and as I say, having watched them again now, I now want to go off and watch Werewolf of London and Wolfman again, particularly because it's really interesting. But I also want to see She-Wolf of London because that sounds very interesting. And so there's lots and lots of werewolf movies. I mean, really, there are so many werewolf movies to choose from. I'd not heard of Silver Bullet, but yeah, 1985 Silver Bullet sounds really good fun. And so hopefully you found that kind of interesting. Listen to me babble about werewolves, and that you'll go out and go out and watch some more werewolf movies and explore some of the ones I've spoken about. And I know we've missed some of the things. Did anyone else here watch the Werewolf TV show back in the 80s? I love that show. Rick Baker did the suit for the Werewolf TV series. Okay, so this is the spin-off from the Michael. I've probably got it here somewhere. Yes, it's going to be Teen Wolf. So this is going to be Teen Wolf that is starring just having to wait for it to go. I can watch that phase. Michael J. Fox, oddly enough, terribly appropriate. And it's yeah. Incidentally, I have to say, Craig and I are big fans of the current series of Teen Wolf, mostly because it involves, well, it's got gay characters in it, and that always helps. So there was a Big Wolf on There was Big Wolf on Campus, which was a comedy TV show for mid to late teens. Okay, Teen was my first, but Monster Squad was a good one when I was a nipper. So it's from Derek. Hi, Derek. And there's Big Wolf on Campus, which was a comedy TV show for mid to late teens. Okay, fair enough. And yeah, so when I asked Craig, who's your favorite werewolf? Derek the Angry Baker. So those of you who watch that TV series, you'll know who we mean by Derek the Angry Baker. What I also, incidentally, I haven't mentioned is the fact that the Howling has got at least 5 sequels. In fact, 7 sequels that I'm counting. 7 sequels. Can we get up to number 8? One of the most successful werewolf franchises. Yeah, interesting. Okay. I just sent you the link to the one. Tupra Baby was okay. Werewolf. Okay. Thriller horror. Frank Lupo. Okay. Werewolf is an American horror series and one of the original shows in the Fox Network broadcast lineup during the inaugural season 1987 to 1988. I'd not come across that one at all. Okay, right, so my apologies, Craig corrected me on this one. It's called Werewolf, not Teen Wolf. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, there's lots so you can watch Teen Wolf. That is funny. And again, I do appreciate that. One of those reasons that is fun. It's just fun. It really is. So hopefully, I think that's yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about werewolves. Thank you very much indeed for joining me and sharing that with me. That was a lot of fun. And you've given me some more films for me to go off and watch at some point. And one of the things that we're going to do this similar thing next week. And again, if you want to come and join me and talk about your favorite, we're going to be discussing Frankensteins and their monsters. I thought that was terribly appropriate because next week is Easter Sunday. So I thought it was appropriate we talk about the things that are rising from the dead. Anyway, yeah, so please join me and have a think about who your favorite Frankenstein and their monsters, and maybe put on the Ritz as well. And hopefully some of you will be available to join me. If not, I shall be here chatting away. Again, thank you very much indeed for watching, and I will hopefully see you next week. And in the meantime, here's a word of caution. from the end of The Company of Wolves, and which was also put on the uh, and I was like, Wolfman is great too, full of clips. Cops that take a serum that turns them into wolves. Okay, that's another one. Thank you. So, now as then is simple truth, that sweetest tongue has sharpest tooth. And you just look out for those wolves that are hairy on the inside. Okay, folks, take care. Bye.